We are back with another stacked podcast interview edition, and I have with me the legend himself,
That's
I will say
juicy.
the kingpin of the. See, I've always said it as Con-Cret, like just but there is obviously an overarching name. But I feel like the Con-Cret name is the best one. But we have with us Freddy from the creators of Con-Cret. Thank you for joining.
Absolutely. It's great to be back on and talk with you again. But to your point, you're right. Vireo Systems is actually the parent company, and Con-Cret is one of our brands because it's both finished good and we license the ingredient as well. But beyond that, we have several other brands that fall under that Vireo Systems in various different categories there. But yeah, Con-Cret is one of our best well-known brands in terms of overall global. And Anyway, so yeah, excited about where we've advanced. I don't know if you remember when we last did a pod together, YouTube video, but I think it was maybe a couple of years ago.
It
And we were
was, yeah.
talking, and at one point of that conversation, I remember you specifically were asking, okay, what's in the next for Vireo? Are you guys going to be doing other ingredients or something like that? And I said, yeah, good chance or something like that. So, and from that, time we were well in development and the process of HydroNOx at that point. But it's really exciting to finally have the ingredient launched. The clinical study that we did, which was an independent, it was a very robust study. It was 30-person independent, 4-arm, of course, with 1 placebo, both the urine analysis as well as blood plasma analysis to really get the data and see it from a couple different ways of what this ingredient was actually creating in the body in terms of nitric oxide production. But the history of the ingredient was essentially probably it's over 6 years ago when I was looking at what we had and what we had really championed with the creatine HCl molecule and the properties that it had, being significantly more soluble, being faster absorbed, as well as requiring a lower dosing. I was like, went to Mark Faulkner, our CEO, and I said, hey, what other amino acid molecules do you think we have potential in? Because I've got a few I think would be perfect for this application, the hydrochloride carrier molecule. And he's like, well, I don't really know because, you can think on paper, something's actually going to be stable in the HCl, but it's not always the case. I mean, that's why I think about 16, 18% of pharmaceuticals even use hydrochloride, but it's got to be right. It's got to be stable in the setting of the full ingredient. So I actually had a few that I'd written down, and I said I'd really like to start with a citrulline HCl if we can actually have it stable and then see what we get, So that was the first part of the process. And so we went through that. We were able to stabilize it, and it was then offered to, okay, what's next? Or rather graduated up to, okay, what's the next step? So basically, I was the one that said, I'm going to beta test that, guys. All right. So, and the way we went about it, because when you get a novel ingredient, you don't have dosing, right? So you really have to kind of discover what the sweet spot is. But the really great thing about a nitric oxide product, just like in a different setting, a caffeine, it's a very tangible benefit, right? Caffeine, you can really feel your energy uptick, get a little bit of caffeine buzz if you're not desensitized to caffeine like we are clearly. But yeah, so there you go. Case in point. So, but yeah, so the nitric oxide, there's those very tangible benefits that you see in or be able to track, like vascularity, pump level, endurance in terms of not only on per set, but through your entire workout. What are you seeing that's maybe different than what has been out there before, or what is currently available for a nitric oxide enhancing ingredient or blend? And so essentially what I did is I started with 750 milligrams, and then either weekly or biweekly, I would graduate that dose, based on what I was seeing. So if I really wasn't feeling like I was turning or seeing those tangible benefits, then I would progress quicker. I would go 1 week and then move to a gram, 1.25 grams. And I did that, week over week or biweekly, tried to hold everything standardized as possible to be able to get a fair analysis of each dosing. And so through that process, I felt like where I really hit the sweet spot was between 2 grams and 4 grams. And what I was noticing was clearly much faster than any branded, patented, or other commodity ingredient in nitric oxide space that I've used. But between the 2 and 4 grams, I noticed the speed of that nitric oxide, the vascularity then produced, the vasodilation. And so the other thing I noticed was, again, that pump that was much, much more significant in terms of the output and the endurance that came from that. And so that range is where I kind of locked in, because then once I progressed past 4 grams, I felt like that's when diminishing returns kicked in.
Yeah.
So which happens with any nutrient, of course, to a degree. And so it was really exciting when I walked, after weeks and weeks and weeks of going through this, to really feel like I had something that was unique, with that experience, and that was, being repeated, with the workouts when I was in that range. Didn't matter if I was doing arms, if I was doing back, chest, legs, it didn't matter. I was still having those same repeated results, which is a great sign. But at this point with that beta test, it was purely observation, right? It's a starting point, but it was purely observational. So after going through that process, again, for several weeks, then, and feeling like I had that sweet spot, then the next step that we did was to go to, or rather have our solubility study done, which we had done at Vanderbilt University here in Nashville, where we're based out of. And with that, it was really, really a cool moment in the process, because it showed that the HydroNOx, the citrulline HCl, was 3x more soluble than L-citrulline, which was our comp. And what's intriguing to me about that is that it really then was like being light bulb, because, I got that dosing of 2 to 4 grams where I felt like max result, to equate to what that 6 divided by 3 obviously is 2. And then it starts to line up a little bit more at that point. You got something to kind of lean on that says that, hey, this may be, something that is really exactly what kind of we anticipated, the observational. And now with the solubility state, it became more theoretical. Theoretically, this is lining up. But so then the next step, and the one that would be the biggest decider of the ingredient's ultimate output, novel benefits, and so on, is the clinical study. So we had the observation, we had the theoretical. Now we needed the validation from the actual raw data points that we could actually track and see what the difference between this was. And in the study, in the 4 arms, our main focus was on the 2 grams of HydroNOx versus 6 grams of regular L-citrulline. Because again, we wanted to kind of take what we had pieced together at this point and then propose that. We also did a 6 grams of HydroNOx versus a 6 of the L-citrulline, which should have shown us in the data that there was that diminishing returns as far as, okay, how top out are you as far as peak arginine in the bloodstream and so on. And then we had a placebo in there as well. So the study was conducted, and of course, like anything, it takes much longer than you would want or anticipated. And that was one of the things that was really cool being in this process from start to finish was, I learned a lot in terms of the process of an actual clinical study, how it's done in timing, because everything, like I said, just seems to take so long with it. But not knowing, it was an experience for me to go through. So we go through the clinical study, and that's really where it was a moment of just like, wow, because what happened and what came out of that study was a lot of benefits that were novel, and some that were even not expected. Like for instance, in the study, we had the 2 grams versus the 6 grams. We found that the 6 grams of citrulline and the charting into the situation was significantly higher, not converting into the arginine. And, of course, one of the other good reasons of having that 6 grams versus 6 grams comparison is that even at that point, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just somebody saying, well, of course, there was more citrulline non-converted in the urine because, you're taking more in versus a 2-gram dosing. But the reality is it still converted significantly more efficiency, with the data coming back of being 333% better conversion into arginine in the bloodstream. So that's going to ramp up nitric oxide. The other really very fascinating thing was that the peak levels of arginine in the blood for HydroNOx versus L-citrulline was 1.7x of that of the citrulline. And this is the 2 versus 6 again. So this, for clarity, this is where we focused most of our attention on, because that would really give us the best data to support the claims that we needed for the 2 grams. But what was also fascinating is that we got back the levels of when was that arginine at, hitting peak levels in the bloodstream. How long did it take? And then that's where the very lowest data point that we had in the whole study was 50% faster, but that charted all the way up to 100% faster absorption than the L-citrulline, that's 6 grams. And so it was basically almost like something that came back when it was observational on my beta test. It was highlighting a lot of these things that exactly what I was experiencing: more NO, faster NO production, and one that had those unique novel benefits that are tangible in the sense that, yes, better pumps, better, and faster, hitting those pumps. And then, of course, also this other benefit of more endurance through the workout because that heightened and more efficient delivery of the nitric oxide. So
it's very much essentially the pump, the citrulline version of Con-Cret, which was, I guess, kind of the goal, really, or the expected goal when I just on paper, I guess. I think when I read it, because I can't remember where I saw it. It was, you didn't tell me much about it, I don't think. When I first saw it, it was written down on I swear I saw it at the booth. And I think that was, and you hadn't told me about it. And then as soon as I saw citrulline HCl, I was like, oh shit. Like I get light bulb moment kind of connected, and I was like, oh, okay, I can see what we're doing here. And
when we first actually, I'm sorry, go ahead, Shay.
No, like you're saying, it turned out precisely what you were anticipating from the get-go anyway.
Yeah, and that was, I think that was at Supply Side West maybe a couple of years ago, where we had just had our solubility studies come back, and so we were able to start at least getting the word out that, once this is, fully validated by the clinical studies, then we would be launching this ingredient. And it was at that point, you may remember from talking to me back then, I was convinced, from everything that I experienced and believed in this ingredient. I would talk about it like it was already had the clinical studies validating claims, because I had experience. I'd gone through that, and that's how excited I was.
I think the concept, though, like the knowing supplements as it is, I think if you know what creatine HCl is and you're someone who knew enough about supplements in general, I think as soon as you hear citrulline HCl, you're like, oh, I think even though the studies came later and proved it anyway, I think a lot of people understood, mostly because of the work you did with creatine HCl in the first place. I think it kind of almost makes no sense as to why it wouldn't be very much the same, like heightened efficacy on that smaller amount.
Yeah, you're right. And one of the things that's been really nice versus when Mark actually first originally launched the Con-Cret, which started as our branded goods and then evolved to be having requests to license the ingredient in pre-workouts by many different brands. When he launched it back then, it was a much steeper hill to climb to really educate. Don't get me wrong, we have to re-educate the market, and we have to continue to pay attention to that because, again, it's a very fairly new ingredient, creatine HCl, compared to monohydrate on the market and the adoption and the use. But the nice thing with the HydroNOx, the citrulline HCl, is that the adoption we've already seen be much more rapid. Because with our creatine HCl, their awareness of it, the awareness of the differences and the benefits of that, it's very quick to be understood, by most, not all, but by most, in terms of that benefit translating over, because the science and reputation that we had from that kind of carries over. So
I think you paved the way with Con-Cret, and then I think even the thing is there's so many brands that I would think it would be very hard to find a brand that didn't know the baseline difference of creatine monohydrate versus HCl. So I think it's a much easier way to go, because again, brands that have done it, or about it or use it, you've already done it, so you don't need to, I guess, convince them any further. Consumers, I understand, would be a difficult or a more difficult one, but the brands would be much easier than I imagine going way back and saying, hey, that thing you've trusted for a decade, it's the same thing. Just it's a concentrated version. I think you've done the legwork. I think it makes sense as to why I think the adoption, and as we're discussing, and as people can now see, brands have picked it up pretty damn quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes back to two things, I think, like you said, and I, completely agree that adoption we've seen be faster. But, in brands that we work with currently and license our creatine HCl to now, we know, and I know from personal use of nitric oxide products through the years, there's been a bit of a lull in a new ingredient launched in the nitric oxide space that actually does have novel and translatable benefits, not just on paper in terms of what the study says, but something that the consumer will experience. And what was really cool early days after, I went through the beta test, then I started, having some people to send to that I knew they would be very honest. They would actually be able to see how they did on the ingredient. Did they notice anything that was unique? So from that, though, we started hearing feedback of, this stuff rocks, man. I love it by itself. I love it in a blend, which I think is really cool about this ingredient too. You could have it isolated. Say if you're a runner, don't necessarily want to have a pre-workout before you run, but you want that oxygen enhanced benefits, the freer blood flow. You could take it in a standalone version. But it's great as a teammate as well. I mean, it really the best way to kind of put it is it supercharges those ingredients that are with it, ideally in different pathways to enhance the nitric oxide, but it really is wonderful in both. I think after I got done with the beta test, one of the cool things was then being able to start pairing it and see what I thought really rocked with this ingredient. And there's a lot of different ingredients that I tried with it, and many were just felt like it seriously just kind of enhanced the whole experience, and not in just some kind of way that you would be like, oh, more vascular, but you would actually see your performance rise and such from the ingredient as well. And back to, what we were saying about consumer education and stuff. I think one of the things that we will, with the hydrochloride setting, with its natural properties and its benefits, one of the things that's always the toughest is to have a consumer understand that it's a lower dosing, but that does not mean it's underdosed. It would be the same way as comparing a rotary phone to a smartphone and saying, well, that's too small of a phone for your iPhone. I better stick with what I know. And it's, technology and science both progress. And that's one of the things that I think is the biggest challenge always with both of these ingredients is to make sure the consumer understands the uniqueness of the ingredient and the way it absorbs in the body, and therefore the way that it translates to what the dosing is required. So
I think people are more I think they're more understandable or accepting of I think it's more believable now. Like if you went out, like if you just let's say we're at the Arnold and you had, I don't know, a pile of standard citrulline and then the pile of HydroNOx, and just said, hey, this is the same thing. I think people seeing that and understanding that, I think it's much more believable now. Whereas back when Con-Cret was still kind of emerging, we had what? I mean, there was more, but I'm exaggerating. We had like 10 ingredients to choose from type thing, right? So it was just and there were only maybe 20 big brands influencing what people were doing. So if no one else was doing it and you were trying to sell the story, it was much harder. Whereas again, we've seen Con-Cret now, and we went through the whole DMAA era where people proved that less can hit harder. Different game entirely, but I think it's more accepting these days. I am curious with the name, obviously HydroNOx. I felt like you had a good opportunity there to just continue that Con-Cret. Like you could have. Was that ever on the table? It's not the most intelligent question, but I feel like
No, it's a good question because it's relevant to the point that we actually discussed that. We were discussing.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, we did. The reason why is that we thought, well, is it better to try to leverage this ingredient under Con-Cret brand name? Because at that time, it still is like you said earlier, it's very recognized in the industry. But the challenge of that was it almost gets back in the day when we used to have Promera Sports and then we'd have Con-Cret. Well, nobody knew Promera Sports, right? They just knew Con-Cret.
I did.
Well, of course, but I mean on the general consumer. So it was like, why aren't we leaning into Con-Cret more? And that's when we came out last time we spoke actually on this was when we did the Con-Cret Plus, where it was like,
you did.
We leaned on that. We got rid of the Primera because it just really had no relevance. The issue with the Con-Cret in this case was that's a specific ingredient, you know? And so we were looking at ways to do that. I mean, Con-Cret stands for concentrated creatine. I mean, that's how it was, you know, formulated and created, that idea. And we looked at a lot of different names for this. But the HydroNOx, the hydro prefix for the hydrochloride, and of course the NOx on the back end there. And I liked it. I mean, at one point we were looking at BioNOx, and I just thought, you know, I just thought it had kind of a gross connotation when you hear it. It just something about it. I don't know. It sounds like something.
Well, it was BioGrow. Like obviously we had Isotore's BioGrow was snatched up. So was Con-Cret ever on the table?
Citrulline. I mean,
was that ever on the table?
We everything was on the table, but what we were actually, I was at our old office. I was in the kitchen area, the break area, I should say, with Mark, and Mark's like, well, how about HydroNOx? You know, we just use the front. We keep the NOx from the BioNOx, the suggested one time that was kind of. And then I was like, I love it. I think it actually sounds a lot better than the BioNOx. And just the more I thought about it, it's like, I think that's the one.
BioNOx, like you use the word bio, and it like it kind of has that bioengineered aspect to it. Like it makes it feel like there might be more to it, and it kind of
or it sounds like something you put on your grass, like a fertilizer or something, you know, at the house.
Yeah, that too. That too.
So yeah, the bio in that, the prefix was from the bioavailability, right? So that was the idea behind that. But at the end, that's how we landed the HydroNOx. But to your point, your earlier question, we did discuss is there a way we can combine these? But we felt like, you know, Vireo's a parent company. That's fine. It doesn't necessarily need to be the most. It's not the brand though, right? So we said these will be their own unique platforms and names to hopefully, you know, continue to build out these novel ingredients that we want to continue working on.
So if we get another one, maybe caffeine HCl. I don't know if that's possible, but
caffeine
HCl. We would get a whole name entirely to continue this, because I did like that it was somewhat separate, and because I know other ingredients have had not similar issues, but that same problem where it's like it makes it sound similar, or you'd think automatically that it has similar benefits, not necessarily on the whole back end on the molecular side, but they would think that they might have thought it was a strength version of citrulline. So I can understand. I did like that you kind of let it stand on its own with this whole different name, as opposed to, you know, from the makers of Con-Cret and something similar that would be recognizable. And as I was saying, it's one of the first couple brands, arguably one of the biggest brands out there, is one of the first to use it, and at least in the pre-workout setting. And we've got Muscle Tech Stacked Pre that's just rolled out at Vitamin Shot. I do like the name. Again, obviously there's no 3 in it, but I did like the name of that pre-workout.
And you did. You're going to get a shirt from Raza, right, to put on?
Other people have used
Stack Pre.
Other people have used the word stacked, and I'm just like, you know what? I like that. People might confuse the two. That's good. It helps me.
Yeah.
But it was a good pre. I was going through the list because you didn't tell me shit about it. I only found that at Vitamin Shop. I didn't hear from Muscle Tech. I didn't hear from anybody about it. No.
Okay. Yeah. I think I think actually the closest I came to really telling you something, maybe early days, was back at FIBO when we, you know, hung out and chatted and caught up for a while.
You guys were working on it then?
Yeah. We've been, funny enough, Shane, here goes back to me being, you know, the true believer in this ingredient, and just, you know, not like a hopeless optimist, but just from what I experienced with it and knew it was going to be a game changer. I actually, you know, started talking to Muscle Tech about this ingredient probably about a year and a half, seriously about this, about a year and a half before the clinical study was actually completed. Started wanting to say, hey guys, this is coming, you know, this is going to be something special. We'll have it validated, of course. And if the study came back and it wouldn't, I'd kind of look like a fool. But at the same time, it was some process that I was starting early because I just believed in it.
They'd done creatine HCl before though, haven't they? I swear.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
they license our creatine HCl in a few of their products actually.
It's a while, right? I'm pretty sure they've used it for quite some
They
time,
have.
I thought.
They have, yeah, absolutely. And they, like I said, the cool thing is we continue to grow on that side with them as well. They'll be launching some new products that are included our creatine HCl. But yeah, from that existing relationship, that's why I was reaching out to them early to let them know where we were at, what was going on, what the process was going to be. But then please get this on your radar, because it was something. Like I said, I could have looked like a fool. But it wouldn't. Thank goodness I had a deep.
I feel like they would have, much like I was saying, if you know they pay for and use Con-Cret. So I suspect that Raza was probably very much like I was saying. Well, I don't see why this wouldn't work. Like, I mean, one of the most down, I guess, smart. I'll say one of the most smartest people I know in the industry. So if he's taken a note, he definitely would have probably suspected what came out anyway.
Yeah, working with Raza, Maya, Sydney, their chief scientific advisor there, and was great because they really were excited about the ingredient from the initial kind of layout of what we had information wise then. But it really started to ramp up, again, once we got to that clinical study and actually got to present the evidence to them of the novel benefits and the key differences in this ingredient and how it was being utilized by the body and what it was ultimately producing for the body in terms of the nitric oxide benefits. But so, yeah, it's great to have, like I said, like you said, one of the largest, if not the supplement companies in the world that really embraced it, early. And wanted to utilize that ingredient as soon as it was available. So, yeah, great group. And they've always been pioneers in innovation. That's what they really want to do, which is
kind of
nice.
Like being one of the first on these sorts of science-based things.
A lot of great products through the years that were firsts, and so with this, it was something that there's a really good harmony between us and them because we always want to have innovation in our ingredients that bring unique and novel benefits to the consumer. And if it's not there, if it's not validated, then we'll walk away. But yeah, so that partnership is great in that regard. So yeah, excited for the Stack3d. It's a monster of a product. I mean, it's really, really, as the name says.
Does the name justice?
Yes.
Does the name justice?
It does.
I like it.
I'm excited to see how that is received by the consumer.
So from obviously there might have been an exception where you were talking to them beforehand. So I imagine that they already had a place for it potentially, and then the clinical came. And had they kind of gone through much of the process? Like, did they just need it to, or did they not really start figuring out where they could use HydroNOx until the clinical dropped?
Yeah, so I think as we got into the point where we had the data back, and even though the clinical study, which should be published here in a few weeks in a Journal of Nutrition, but it was a point where I think with that initial review where we said, here's the data, they had an idea, they had a placeholder in their head. But again, they have to have those claim validations. So if they make a claim, it has to be validated. And they're very thorough on that too.
Oh yeah.
And for good reason, for very good reason. But at the same time, that was something that was the progress that we were making. But as soon as we got to a point where we were like we knew that data was validated now, and it would be going in the published study. We were able to send over once the manuscript was crafted for the study that would be published. So we were able to send that to them, so they were able to analyze and evaluate and check all the numbers and such like that themselves. So yeah, it was a process for sure. But the good thing is that they had again an early lean in to this ingredient, and then once they see the results, they really embraced it for being something that was completely unique and really was going to have ultimately a better performance, better impact for their customer that uses the product with it.
So I guess that might be an exception then. Obviously, you got it onto the radar early, and then the process was pretty quick from there. are we going to see like a run of brands? You don't need to name any, obviously, but I'm just like, are we going to see like a bunch of others follow suit that are in the works? Probably not necessarily moving as quickly.
The whole thing with that is that we have a lot of products from different brands that are in the works right now. And the funny thing is we haven't even yet published the study. We're able to, have a meeting and speak, and I could share that. But until the study's actually published, we can't just blanket out there the information associated.
You could like give them like a brief, like this is what's going to be type thing.
He's like bullet point highlights, just something that's very, top view down. And then once the study is published, then we can at that point be able to share this freely. So a lot of this communication that we've had has been organic, from everything from the little pieces that you've had along the way that you've posted about HydroNOx and its development, to again going to trade shows and speaking with people and letting them know this is on the horizon. And so it was good to get that early start too, because then you could kind of continually feed the information and allow them to get more and more excited about the ingredient when we got more and more positive data information back on the ingredient. So yeah, we do have several brands in the works right now with projects. And Old School Labs was an early adopter of the ingredient as well. Yeah. And we have a few others that are utilizing the ingredient, or currently we are in talks with, or like I said previously, are actually in the development stage of those products now that will be coming in.
So it's going to be it's going to hopefully, or sounds like it'll be a HydroNOx filled end of the year or second half of the year. It sounds, and to be honest, as you touched on earlier, it is the pre-workout category in pumps. Anything kind of innovation wise in the pre-workout category, I think, is just everybody loves it. It's a fast paced category, and nowadays some brands have like 5 different pre-workouts. It's very normal to have 2, 3 stim-free, pump-focused, higher stim. So it's a thriving space for the brand to land. And then with the benefit of, I think the concentrated dose is a big point as well, because it allows you to fit into smaller areas, whether it be capsule, whether they be trying to shoot for a specific size, whether they be whatever the benefit be. I think it's you hit an ingredient that, like I say this all the time, there are maybe 5 core ingredients that are in every single pre-workout that you kind of need to see to say this is a pre, and obviously caffeine, beta-alanine, betaine, and then citrulline is right up there, usually at the top, because it's the heaviest on almost every occasion. Yep. And it you kind of gave reason to help brands stand out on something that is usually like a must-have. So I think it's a great path into that category, specifically pre-workout category, because obviously Con-Cret can be found in some, but it's having that citrulline, which I would say is far more common, is great work on your guys.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I think the 2 big drivers are, like you said, in every pre-workout, you may have some that use creatine, some that don't, but virtually, on all these products, they'll have citrulline featured.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes up to 10 grams. I mean, it's crazy how big they can go with the dosing.
Even the cost effective ones, that's a must have in the situation of whether it's premium at the $60 range or sub 30, like citrulline is there. And like it's at the top of the list. So it's the one that people remember the most, followed by beta-alanine.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And the thing about the not only the need or the use of the L-citrulline in virtually all the pre-workouts and such like that was also on a greater scale. If you look at it from perspective of, again, we just haven't had any real innovation in the last decade in nitric oxide. There's a lot of great ingredients out there for nitric oxide, but at the same time, it's like people crave innovation in this industry. Why? Because it doesn't happen all that often, Shane. I mean, the amount of time, like I said, 6 years and money that goes into the, funding that clinical study, hoping that the results, come back to actually merit that drop that you just made. So it's a very challenging, time consuming, process. But, you know, when you get to that finish line and you can offer the ingredient to the market, it's awesome, because, you know, once those validated claims are there, that it's not just me saying, hey, anymore. Back when the beta testing was like, this ingredient is something special. It's about, it evolves into then this ingredient is not only special, try it yourself, but it's also validated science, which is very important to us too. You know, just like we were talking with Muscle Tech, you know, they want any ingredient to go in there to be validated. And that's the same. Anything that we put on the market, we want to make sure it's absolutely scientifically validated, and we'll give those unique benefits to the consumer, to where they can really lean into the ingredient themselves by use and saying, well, I got to have my workouts with this. So yeah.
No, I think you summed it up pretty nicely. I think you covered it from the ground up. I think we didn't have a plan on this podcast, but we ran it.
We never have a plan, Shane.
It's a life goal of mine to never have a plan on almost every occasion.
I like that.
But I think we covered it from the ground up. I think we like we're saying, you can now, HydroNOx is in a couple of products right now, specifically in sports nutrition. And by the sounds of things, that list is going to be significantly larger by the time we hit supply side in October.
Yeah, I think my hopes are now, especially once we can publish, once the study is published, and then there's more visibility on it, that that natural like interest in this ingredient from brands will continue to rise. And for me, it's exciting, because the interest is already, you know, in this stage right now of not having the study published, where it's open to eyes everywhere. It's been amazing to see how it has been adopted and embraced by, you know, big brands, smaller brands, doesn't matter. You know, we're here for it, because we want your product to be the best it can be. So yeah, I expect to see a lot more trend up at Q4 this year in terms of those in active product development. And then hopefully we'll see in Q1 in 2026 a significant use by brands in their pre-workouts as a standalone. And like you said, back, it was a great point. You mentioned capsules. This is actually something that you could put in a capsule and have a practical dosing amount. So, you know, if you're just wanting to have a capsule there in the car, if you're hitting the gym, you didn't expect to have to go as late as you did, you can pop those, and it's easy. It's practical. And that's the same way.
Well, you have the pump capsule category. It's like subcategory as such. There was quite a few of those. I still strongly say it was Noxygen that started it, but yeah, like there's been many others, and they're starved for ingredients that can actually fit in there. So it's right. It slots right in.
Yeah, and it's funny you brought up Noxygen, because that was one of the pairings that I used with the HCl. And in my exploratory phase of then mixing it with other ingredients and formulas out there and such. And I'm telling you what, that little stack of the two ingredients in there, and then our third, which is glycerol and
there's a sodium nitrate. I think they might have butane and sodium in there.
Yeah, and then adding in that citrulline HCl was, like I said earlier, it was really a supercharger. And I love that little blend of those ingredients. But it works, you know, perfectly. It works great with nitrogen, and just it was really remarkable to see the synergy between these other ingredients that may be working on unique or different pathways, and how the overall effect was just, you know, much greater by adding the HydroNOx. So,
well, I think that'll do it for this one, but might have you back on, I guess, as we maybe around later, maybe this time next year, maybe later in the year. But thank you for coming on and like I said, breaking it down and just giving us that rare look behind ingredients and stuff like that.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. It's always great to talk to you. We'll see you out at supply side later this year. And
yes.
Yeah, I always have a blast. So yeah, I appreciate the time.
Thank you.